break the stand?
No, sir, I need to get through this. I need to have something inside of me to get through this.
A very emotional day in the Casey Anthony murder trial. Her father, George, back on the stand. Question after question about molestation allegations.
Sir, I would never do anything to harm my daughter in that way.
His suicide attempt.
For that particular day, I don't know, it just felt like the right time to go and be with Kaylee.
And what he believes happened to his granddaughter.
You told him that something had happened to Kaylee and Casey was lying.
Sir, definitely something happened to Kaylee. She's no longer with us. And Casey was the last one that I saw with Kaylee. 1 and 1 adds up to 2, sir, in my mind.
I want to know your thoughts on my question of the day. What do you think about the interaction between George and Casey's attorney, Jose Baez? Send me a message on Twitter or Facebook or call into the show. Here's my number, 877-TEL-HLN.
Controversy, opinion, point of view. This is Prime News.
Good evening, I'm Vinnie Politan, live in Orlando, Florida, outside of the Orange County Courthouse. Welcome to Prime News. It was day 31 today inside that courtroom. And that number, very important to this case, right? This whole case is about 31 days that Casey Anthony told no one about what happened to her daughter, Kaylee. But on this, the 31st day, we still haven't heard an explanation from the defense about those 31 days. And a lot of things happened today. We learned about the court schedule. You know, closing arguments look like they're going to be Saturday right now. And if the jury wants to come in on Sunday, they're coming in on Sunday. And if they get the case, they'll be deliberating on the 4th of July. Also today, Cindy Anthony took the stand. Also, who was hanging out in the hallway? The alleged mistress of George Anthony, Crystal Holloway, didn't take the stand but was waiting in the wings. Also today, we heard from George Anthony. And he was the focal point of everything that happened today. He was a defense witness, but when he got off that stand, I believe he moved the prosecution much closer to a conviction than he moved the defense to reasonable doubt. And there was one issue in particular that I thought was huge. And we've been wondering, and I've been wondering since the beginning of this case, what does George think? What does this grandfather and father believe happened? Does he believe that his daughter could be a killer? Well, guess what, folks? Today, in front of this jury, after being called by the defense, it became crystal clear to them and anyone else watching this testimony that George Anthony now believes his daughter killed his granddaughter. It was the biggest moment of the day.
August 2009, did you make any media appearances where you were advocating the innocence of your daughter?
Possibly I did, without seeing the context or things like that, sir. I didn't want to believe back then that my daughter could be capable of taking the life of her daughter.
Mr. Anthony, on August 5th of 2009, you still believed that your granddaughter was killed by someone and it happened not in the custody of your daughter. Isn't that what you believed in August of 2009?
Yes.
And in that deposition, you and I sparred in much the same way you sparred with Mr. Baez here today.
Yes, sir.
And during that deposition, you were upset that you were being called upon to give testimony implicating your daughter in the murder of your granddaughter. That was your emotional state in August of 2009, correct?
Correct.
But today, you no longer believe that your granddaughter died in the custody of someone other than your daughter.
Sustain.
You know, it goes to bias.
Sustained.
When you were giving the statement on July 24th, 2008, that Mr. Baez discussed with you at length, did you ever tell the police that you thought your daughter murdered your granddaughter?
I didn't believe that at that time, sir. No.
In January of 2009, a month or so after you, let me strike that. You learned in December of 2008 that the remains of your granddaughter were found. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
What effect did that have on you when you learned that Kaylee's remains had been found?
A deep hurt inside. Tears. The whole gamut of just an emotional loss, a breakdown inside of me, and seeing what my wife and my son went through.
Up to that moment, had you held out the hope that Kaylee would be found alive?
Absolutely. Every day from July 15th until the day we were told it was Kaylee.
Unbelievable. You listen to that testimony, and I listen to that testimony, and and there's no question, the way he said those answers, the way he testified today, he believes Casey Anthony is responsible for the death of his granddaughter. And that jury got the message today, folks. This is huge. This is one of those OMG moments on Twitter. Joining me tonight in Orlando, the Honorable Alex Ferrer, host of the syndicated Judge Alex Show. Criminal defense attorney Meg Strickler also with us. And in Atlanta, my pal, criminal defense attorney Drew Finling. Great to have everyone with me tonight. Thank you so much for being here. Meg, let me start with you. Ladies first tonight, Judge, if you don't mind, Your Honor. My goodness. I mean, generally, the folks know at home, generally this testimony and these opinions of you believe someone's guilty, that doesn't come in.
Right, right.
The jury got the message. The door was opened a little bit, and in comes, boom, George Anthony with Jeff Ashton.
You know what? George looked very sincere today. I mean, you can be a pathological liar. You can be, meaning all these different personalities we've seen so far in this circus of a trial. We've seen all kinds of things. But the crying, when somebody cries, it's really hard to fake that unless you're, Angelina Jolie or somebody like that who's a fabulous actress or actor. He looked so genuine today when he cried. And then Casey Anthony's not saying anything.
That contrast, we're
killed
looking at
us.
that contrast right now.
Right there, yeah. I mean, it kills you to think, wow, what is the jury thinking here? I mean, all of us out here watching it, our hearts are breaking. And I have been on Casey's side for the most part almost throughout this trial, trying to see, because I'm a criminal defense lawyer, I try every single time to find holes.
Today's a tough day to find a hole.
Today's a tough day.
Judge, how about the impact on the jury that the father of the defendant believes she did it? And it wasn't like he believed it all the time. Yeah. Because it came out that, he wasn't cooperating necessarily with police because at that point he was believing in his daughter.
Yeah, he didn't believe it because early on in the case you would see his reactions to the media and to their suggestions.
So what does this do now? What does this do that the jury gets the message that the father of the defendant believes she's guilty?
Not only that, but the father is not painted with that brush about sexual abuse because frankly there's been no evidence of it and they've been waiting for it. They might have discounted it if they thought that the other part of the case was real, but right now the case has been put on. I mean, they're resting tomorrow, so I don't think they're putting Casey on anymore. I think that opportunity's over with. So that means they don't have any other evidence that he did all those horrible things they claimed. He was credible when he denied them, and he was believable and credible when he broke down, and there's this tough ex-cop who you can tell is kind of probably the disciplinarian type.
He turned into a grandpa. He turned into a grandpa on that witness stand. Drew Finling, this is not the way the defense wants to finish their case.
No, it's really not. And here's the important thing that took place. When you roll the dice and you put on who was originally a prosecution witness as your defense witness, then you give the prosecutor the opportunity to ask leading questions which otherwise, weeks ago, would have been objectionable. And so what happened today is when the defense did their direct examination, rightfully, they were objected to almost every question. It was honestly very difficult to watch as a defense lawyer, but the prosecutor's objections were all correct. And then he got up there and did a careful, leading cross-examination and took Daddy to the point of emotional breakdown with a stroke of brilliance.
All right, folks, what are you doing July 4th weekend? Do you have plans? Well, this jury may be deliberating over the weekend. They may be deliberating on July 4th. That's why you got to follow me on Twitter at Vinnie Politan, because if you're at your barbecue, you're with your family, your loved ones, you're celebrating our nation's birthday, if you're following me, I'll tweet you when the jury lets everyone know that they've reached a verdict. That'll give you 20 minutes to get in front of a television, turn on HLN, and watch the verdict live. So make sure you're following me at Vinnie Politan. Today, we saw hours of gripping testimony from George Anthony. Still ahead, more raw emotion from the witness stand as he's asked about a suicide attempt back in 2009.
January 22nd is the day of this alleged attempt, is it not?
Well, sir, it wasn't an alleged attempt. It was an attempt on my... I tried to take my own life. So that's not alleged. That happened. No, sir, I need to get through this. I need to have something inside of me get through this.
You know what I saw today was a grandfather who's been pained and tormented by this case and ultimately heartbroken by the loss of his granddaughter, Kaylee. And I think it was very powerful today that George Anthony on the stand really, again, bringing home to this jury the incredible loss that was suffered by him, suffered by Cindy Anthony, and Lee Anthony, and anyone who came into contact with little Kaylee. My panel's back with me, and that emotion. And we know cases, you know, the law, right, Judge? It's all about the law. This is the element of the crime. But ultimately, this is about human beings. Yeah. This is about a little girl who's dead and a grandpa who's suffering because of it.
Right, absolutely. And the prosecution, I think, is making that point, has made that point throughout the case, but is really going to make that point in closing. And what I'm curious about is, what point is the defense going to make? Because now if they don't call Casey, they're backing out of that drowning. They have no evidence of drowning. They have no evidence of sexual abuse. It's become the ABC defense. Anybody but Casey. As one of my fans on Twitter and Facebook said, if the police had a dog that was trained to smell desperation, it would be alerting on the defense table right now.
There was some other testimony today. I want to get to it. George Anthony also asked about these molestation allegations. Now, the judge said there was no evidence, but I guess the defense tried to get some evidence of it by asking George Anthony about these molestation allegations against his little girl at the time, Casey. Take a listen.
You, of course, would never admit to molesting your child, would you, sir?
Objection. Argumentative.
Overruled. He can answer the question if he can.
Sir, I never would do anything like that to my daughter.
My question is, you would never admit to it, would you, sir?
Sir, I would never do anything to harm my daughter in that way.
All right, he's denying it, but is denial evidence of guilt? If you don't believe him, Meg, is that enough that you can ask the person the question, they say, I didn't do it, and you say, aha, he's lying, we've got proof?
You know, honestly, I still think there is some dysfunction in this family. And I do think there was some sexual abuse here.
We've seen it on display.
Yeah, and I do think there was some sexual abuse here. And I don't think...
Well, we haven't seen that on display, though.
No, I think there still is. I do still think there's a history of sexual abuse in this family.
Well, there was allegations about the brother.
Yes.
But there hasn't been even an allegation about the father.
There's been no evidence of it, but I think that she's a victim of it. And I agree. I don't know if George is it or not. I don't know what happened. But George, if you ask me if I did that to my daughter, and I grant you I'm not a guy, even on the stand in front of a jury, I'd be like, you quit asking that. I would never touch my child. He's still kind of like,
yeah, but remember, he was approached with this allegation 6 weeks before trial.
Yes.
He's had time to digest it and to go through all the emotions and everything.
I still would vehemently, I don't care every time you say it.
You're not buying his denial. Drew Finley.
Sexual abuse.
How about you, Drew, on the sexual abuse? You're buying the denial, number one, and number two, is that enough to be able to argue to this jury that sexual molestation took place? The fact that he's just denying it in a way that you don't believe?
Well, let's put it in its context, and that is this is a death penalty trial, and that is you're also preparing for the penalty phase, so you're really looking into mitigation, and mitigation would be you're the victim of child molestation. So you have to think that with every ounce of energy, this issue has been investigated, and if it's been investigated that vigorously and all you have is one little tricky question, you wouldn't admit to it if you did it kind of thing. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I know we want to say there was a big fight today, but that was just a slippery, tricky TV question from LA Law. You know, that's a repeat from LA Law like 15 years ago. Nobody cross-examines like that, and it's nothing to argue to a jury. I hope they've looked into this and investigated this because of what could be a sentencing part of this case where it will be incredibly relevant if there's a guilty verdict.
Suicide attempt, that was also brought up. Remember George Anthony's suicide attempt in 2009? He was questioned about it today.
Why, on that particular day, did you decide to take your life?
Why that particular day I picked out, I really don't know. All I know is my emotional state, even through today, is very hard to accept that I don't have a granddaughter anymore. But for that particular day, I don't know, it just felt like the right time to go and be with Kaylee.
All right, what is this suicide attempt evidence of, Judge Alex? Is it evidence of grief, despair, heartbreak? Is it evidence of guilt, that maybe he's done something that he's guilty of?
The defense definitely wants to spin it as evidence of guilt. The problem is that once they did that, and they also opened the door to other things earlier on this morning, the prosecution jumped up and said, we don't mind, bring that suicide note and let it in. The defense did not want that note in. So now the prosecution is going to bring it in, and you're going to see it's not evidence of guilt. His guilty feeling he expressed, I feel I let Kaylee down. That's his guilt.
Dramatic day of testimony for George Anthony. We have plenty more to talk about, and I want your thoughts on my question of the day. Here it is. What do you think about this interaction between George Anthony and Jose Baez? 877-TEL-HLN. Give me a call.
There's definitely something happened to Kaylee. She's no longer with us. And Casey was the last one that I saw with Kaylee. 1 and 1 adds up to 2, sir, in my mind.
1 and 1 is 2. I mean, that's George Anthony telling this jury that Casey is responsible for the death of little Kaylee. I mean, that's the message to the jury today. This is unbelievable stuff. Absolutely the worst case scenario, besides a confession by the defendant, for the defense. What a way to finish their case. I mean, they're going to stop their case tomorrow. They're going to rest tomorrow. That's what they told Judge Perry today, at the end of the day. Meg Strickler, 1 and 1 equals 2. Does 1 and 1, though, equal first-degree murder?
No. No matter how you look at it still, I think they're going to probably do second-degree murder to avoid... Which is still life in prison. Which is still... She's going to prison. We know she's going to prison because of the false statements also. I mean, hands down, we got her in prison. But I think it's going to be second degree because they really still... It's a circumstantial case. I don't think today helped, mind you. But I think the jury's going to feel badly for her and avoid the death penalty. Don't even put it in the death penalty phase.
Okay, okay. Now, let's do this, because you guys alluded to it before. I want to go to Cindy Anthony's testimony. And, again, we're talking about sexual abuse here, but it's not the sexual abuse by George on Casey, but Casey's brother, Lee Anthony. And Cindy was put on the stand and asked a direct question about it. Take a listen.
Good morning, Mrs. Anthony.
Good morning.
Mrs. Anthony, do you recall several years back when there was an incident involving your son Lee going into Casey's room at night?
Overrule at this point. Yes or no?
No.
No. No. So, and again, is this proof of anything? Does this tell this jury anything?
Nothing. Nothing. The only way they could have proven any of those allegations from day one was to put Casey on the stand, because you knew Lee was going to deny it. You knew that George was going to deny it. So it's either not true and Casey would get on the stand and lie about it, or it is true and they're going to deny it and she's got to get on the stand and say it. And that's apparently not going to happen. Is she better served by getting on the stand, Meg? Is she better served because then you can make those arguments, you make them a lot stronger, and she's great at lying. If it didn't happen, she's great at lying, and if she was molested, hey, she'll tell the truth.
Honestly,
will anybody believe her?
Yeah, at this stage, if I was a trial lawyer in that courtroom, I probably would put her on, because her credibility's already been destroyed. Her convictions have already been in. Her bad character has already been completely in. Why wouldn't you? Perhaps she could do a George Anthony moment today, and maybe somebody might have compassion for her.
She's got a very small distance to fall compared to other defendants.
So you think there's a possibility we come in here tomorrow morning?
No.
They call. You don't think he's going to?
But I would, because you might as well.
Maybe they're listening tonight. Maybe they're listening tonight. Emotional testimony from George Anthony today. We've been watching. What impact could it have on the defense story that he's a villain, a child molester who orchestrated a cover-up of Kaylee's death? Coming up, I'll bring in a former member of the Casey Anthony defense team to break down what it could all mean to the defense case.